If you're a vegan business, chances are you're looking for exposure and visibility. If you're a consultant, if you're an author, if you're a speaker, if you're a startup, there is a really good chance that you are looking for ways to reach more of your market in the most cost-effective way possible. In today's episode, we're going to talk about how podcast appearances can actually work in your favor to get you lots of visibility. On the flip side, they can work against you if you don't know what you're doing. So stick around.
Welcome to the Vegan Visibility Podcast Show, where your host, Kathleen Gage, shines the spotlight on vegan and plant-based businesses and entrepreneurs from all walks of life committed to cruelty-free eating, healthy lifestyles, animal compassion, and the environment. Enjoy the show.
Hi, this is Kathleen Gage with Vegan Visibility, and I'm talking to the speakers, the authors, the coaches, consultants, and experts out in podcast land, the C-level executives, or anyone who's committed to a clear mission about getting on podcast shows as a way to increase your visibility for your branding, your positioning, and your revenue stream. Now, hands down, podcast appearances, they're going to expose you to hundreds, sometimes even thousands of people and listeners per episode. That's not overall, that's per episode. I have one client who on her very first podcast show, it was the first time she ever appeared on a show. It was a home run show. She actually, for her episode, within about a 48-hour period, they had about 35,000 downloads for one episode. And she said, "Is that good?" And it's like, oh my gosh, if everybody got that kind of visibility, that would be awesome. But imagine, if you will, that you have a plan that you want to get in front of, let's say 50,000 new potential clients, 50,000 people. And let's say on average, a show has 1,000 downloads per episode, which is a decent number of downloads. Some shows have as few as 50 downloads. Other shows have as many as 5 or 10,000 on average. So let's just use 1,000 as the ballpark figure. Well, that would mean that if you got on one show per week for the next year, you would hit your 50,000 person number. If you want to do it faster, you simply appear on more shows. However, there is a process for getting on shows. And today we're going to talk about what that process is and how not to mess up. Let's first of all look at why podcast shows are a great idea. One is visibility. You get massive visibility in front of a market that you otherwise may not have reached. You do get market reached, and it's in a niched and targeted market. If you go on to Apple Podcasts, you go on to Spotify, you go on to virtually any platform, Amazon podcasts, and you look at the different niches for podcasts, there are really niches for just about anything. In my industry, I have Plant-Based Eating for Health. That's one of my shows. And so I bring on people who have turned their health around as a result of going plant-based. I interview nutritionists, authors, speakers that are all focused on plant-based eating as a healthy way to eat, as a way to minimize risks for certain diseases that have become very common diseases like diabetes, heart disease, even erectile dysfunction. That's not a disease, but it's a condition that can be reversed with a good plant-based diet. Now, one of the criteria for my show, and it says it on the description, is that anybody who appears on my show must be 100% void of all animal and dairy products. No exceptions to that. And I actually have been approached by people saying, well, I know that you like to have people that are plant-based and 100% void of animal and dairy. I'm about 90%, and they're not coming on my show. That's just my criteria as a host. So you need to know what is the criteria for the show, because a lot of shows are very niched and very targeted. Podcast shows can really fast track your success if you're really looking for a lot of visibility. The more shows you're on, the better you're going to do. And as a guest, in most cases, the marketing costs are minimal. In most cases, you should not have to pay to be on a show. There are some hosts that they do charge to be on their show. In most cases, I always advise people not to pay, because there's plenty of shows out there that have very targeted audiences, and when you know how to approach a host, you can get on those shows and you can actually get your message out over and over and over. The nice thing about podcast shows is the shelf life, which actually is forever. As long as the host is paying for their hosting provider. And even then, I do believe that the shows stay listed. So, really, really long shelf life. But as far as my expertise, I've been on both sides of the mic well over 1,000 times. I have 2 shows. One is called Plant-Based Eating for Health, and the other one, obviously, is Vegan Visibility, which is this show. Vegan Visibility is more of a business show. It focuses on marketing strategies for vegan and plant-based businesses. And today we're talking about using podcast shows as a way to increase your visibility. So that is part of your marketing. I'm the author of 20 books. I have been a keynote speaker for over 20 years. I've been in the digital marketing space for over 20 years. I've had my business now well over 27 years. When the pandemic hit, I was very actively going out to conferences speaking, and that part of my business literally got wiped off the face of the earth. It was a great opportunity to pivot and, in a sense, reinvent myself. And I went through a period where I was really trying to decide, what is it that I really should be doing, what I want to do, and what would serve my market. And it all came to light that taking all the decades of experience and moving that into the vegan and podcast industry was the way to go. So that's what I actually do now, is I take all the years of experience of helping businesses grow, and I am focusing solely on the vegan and plant-based industries. And those are fast-growing industries. Now, here's some statistics that will actually impress some people, and for other people, maybe not so much, but 144 million Americans listen to podcasts, according to the latest podcast statistics. Put another way, about 51% of the U.S. population older than 12 have listened to a podcast at least once. And in comparison with 2018, 20 million more Americans listen to podcasts now than back then. 32% of Americans listen to a podcast at least once a month. And if you have a loyal following, they'll follow you from podcast to podcast to podcast. But good podcast hosts actually do get fans. They get a following. Now, the important thing about getting on shows is that you need to lay a solid foundation. Part of that foundation is to know what it is that you're going to talk about. It helps if you have what's called a podcast one sheet, and not all hosts are going to ask for that, but basically it's a document that you can send to a host that gives a background on you. It shows it gives some social proof of other shows you've been on or appearances that you've made, topics you can speak on, like myself. I'm certified through eCornell University for plant-based nutrition. I can speak on eating plant-based. I don't like to get into the science of it because that's not really my wheelhouse or my sweet spot, but I can certainly talk about what it's like to be a woman in my 60s who went plant-based in my 60s to get rid of inflammation, and it completely turned my life around. I actually released about 30 pounds, and it has stayed off, and I don't diet. I run on a regular basis. At one point, I broke my wrist, and it healed very rapidly as a result of the way that I eat, and of course, the physical therapy and a good surgeon. That doesn't hurt. But the reality is that's an area that I can speak on. I can also speak on how to build a business, and that's what Vegan Visibility is about. And this show actually used to be called Power Up for Profits, and I rebranded it mid-year in order to be able to more fully serve the vegan and podcast industry. So you want to lay a solid foundation by having your marketing collateral in order, by knowing what types of shows you want to be on, by listening to some shows. Don't just approach a host without having listened to their show, because it may be that they don't even have guests on their show. You also want to do your research and find out, do they bring guests on to their show? Now, one of the things that I created for people specifically in the plant-based arena and the vegan arena is I put a directory together that has 135 listings on how to get on of different podcast shows that take plant-based and vegan focused speakers. And I make that available on my website at veganvisibility.com. That's veganvisibility.com. And it's a directory where we've got the contact information, the type of show, what category it's in, because just because it's a plant-based show doesn't mean it's all going to be in the nutrition category. Some are in mindset, some are in self-development, some are in business. And so in the directory, we actually split it up into several categories. And at the beginning of the directory, I have information on how to get on a show. And I also have some bonus training that I give with it. And I put it together. I charge $27 for it. So if you're looking to get a nice listing of shows within the plant-based vegan niche, then I would suggest you go to veganvisibility.com and check out the directory. Another thing about podcast shows is that you can share your expertise as an author, as a speaker, as a trainer, as a corporate head. The possibilities are endless. Now, one of the things you want to do is really appear on the right shows. For example, I probably wouldn't go on to a show about factory farming just because it's completely out of context of what I'm promoting. So unless they wanted to know, why would a factory farm switch from animals to, let's say, plants? And I don't think that's going to happen. So it really would be a big stretch for me to go on a show like that. Now, in order to appear on the right shows, what happens when you do is you're considered more of an authority, you have more influence, you attract more opportunities, and you get in front of an aligned market to your message. So you really want to look at that as you're looking for show opportunities. In some cases, if you really do your homework and you approach the right shows with the right message, and in my case, when somebody approaches me, if they come right out the gate and say, I listened to your show and I know that you look for people who are 100% void of animal and dairy in their diet, and that's why I'm approaching you. If they approach me with that, they get my attention right away. If, on the other hand, they approach me and they say, yes, I'm a nutritionist and I talk about the keto diet, I'm probably not even going to respond to them, or I'll respond and say, have you even listened to my podcast show? So as a host, I know what we look for. And I know a lot of other hosts too. I have very good friends that host podcast shows, and we all deal with similar situations, even though we may be in completely different niches. Now, when you think about your message, you want to think clearly on what is your core message. As you define your core message, you want to determine who wants to hear this. Based on who wants to hear it, what shows feature experts like you? And another big key is how important is your mission, because you may get rejected a lot early on. The more shows you're on, the easier it is to get on shows. So that first one is always going to be the hardest one, but just keep at it, keep at it, keep at it. And again, check out the directory because I've got some good training with that. It's teaching you the basics of how to get on shows. And if you want to go further than that, I've got the Podcast Rockstar Club that's also listed on my website, and it's a self-paced home study course. So I've got resources available that if you really want to get on podcast shows for a small investment, you can learn how to do the ins and outs of getting on shows. So, now, getting on shows, there's a few different ways to find shows to get on. You could find Facebook groups that have what's called podcast pairing. The host and the guest both appear in the group, and people post what they're looking for. There's Clubhouse that has nearly 100 podcast clubs and daily conversations. There's online platforms like Podmatch, and that's podmatch.com. You can find experts in your niche and then look at the shows that they've been on and follow those shows, listen to the episodes, at least a little bit of a few episodes, and reach out to the host. Again, make sure that the show does take guests, because if they don't take guests, I can assure you, you're not going to be the first one. My good friend, Bonnie Frank, she has had her podcast for quite a while, quite a few years. She doesn't bring guests on. It's completely a fly solo show. And she gets approached all the time for people to be on her show. And they say, oh, I love your show. I know I'd be a great fit. It's like, if you love my show, you know you wouldn't be a great fit because you know I don't take guests on my show. So be sure to listen to the show. Now, the top 3 reasons people won't get on a lot of shows would be they have no clear vision of what they want to accomplish, they have no plan, and they're not consistent in their efforts. And a 4th reason is fear. They study, research, and they never get out there and put skin in the game. So you want to research the shows, make sure that the shows are current, make sure that they bring on guests, make sure it's a fit for your message, and then go from there. Some of the thoughts on getting through the noise is you want to build a strong presence and voice on social media. I'm very, very vocal on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and I've recently started doing stuff on TikTok, and I'm surprised at the result that I'm getting so quickly. My niece, she actually is on TikTok, and she started about 2 weeks ago. She already has about 10,000 followers. She's had well over 80,000 likes, and hers is a very controversial topic. It happens to do with the vaccine, and I'm not going to get into pro or anti-vax here. All I'm saying is that she took a stand, she put her stake in the ground, and she's getting a lot of traction very, very quickly. So a great way to stand apart from all the other people who are going to try to get on the same shows that you are is that you build a strong presence on social media. Have a clear perspective and point of view. My perspective about veganism, about animal cruelty, around eating animals, around eating dairy and consuming dairy is very, very clear. And people have gotten upset with that. That's okay. That's my perspective. That's my point of view. There are shows that absolutely will not have me on because of that. There are other shows because of that, they want me on their show. So have a perspective and a point of view. If you really want to get some traction, appear on a minimum of 1 show per week. So really do your homework, get on at least 1 show per week. Keeping in mind that just because you are interviewed today, it doesn't mean your show will go live for a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, 3 months. The longest I think I went from an actual interview to it going live was about 6 months. The shortest period of time was it was a live interview. And so it went live right away. So, there's everything in between. But the big thing is you want to really have a plan, have a vision, stick to the plan, be consistent, and do your homework. And again, I encourage you, visit my website, veganvisibility.com. That's veganvisibility.com. Have a look around, look at the products I have available, because I focus on helping experts like you get on podcast shows, everything from the directory that's $27 all the way up to done for you services where we will find podcast opportunities for you. This is Kathleen Gage with Vegan Visibility and Plant-Based Eating for Health, encouraging you, go out, be aligned with what you say is true and the actions you take. Be kind to the animals, be kind to your body, and be kind to the planet. Have a great day.
You've been listening to the Vegan Visibility Podcast Show. Be sure to subscribe to get notified when the next episode is live. And we always appreciate reviews. Join us next time for more inspiration, education, and motivation to build your business one cruelty-free and healthy person at a time.